Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first day of workshops for the summit. Um, we will start by doing introduction so we have a sense of who's here. And welcome to those streaming in on Zoom as well. And you can introduce yourselves in the chat and while we go around here. We'll try to go as quickly as possible. So your name, your affiliation, and where you're from, like if you're out of town or from here. Okay. So I'll start from.
Hi, I'm Emily Martin with Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, and I am from Iowa, so out of town.
Ooh, that's Hi everyone, I'm Tessa. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the Village of Northbrook, which is a suburb of Chicago. So I'm also out of town, and we're looking to become a member, so that's why I wanted to present.
Hi, I'm Sam Bretz. I'm from Chicago. I work for the Illinois Agri-Food Alliance. I'm the projects and office coordinator.
I'm Matt Lynn. I'm with the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission from Madison, Wisconsin.
I'm Linda Rader. I'm local. I'm at LaDubois Watkins High School, and I work in the office.
I'm Kelly Kranick. I work with Linda at LaDubois Watkins High School locally here, and I teach social studies. I'm our greenhouse coordinator, and I'm a graduate student studying educational leadership and sustainability.
Hi, I'm Melissa Whithill. I'm the Associate Director and Regional Climatologist for the Midwestern Regional Climate Center at Purdue University. We're located in West Lafayette, Indiana, so I'm a climatologist.
Hi, my name is David Fight. I'm a professor here at WashU, so very local, and I oversee our environmental studies program and advisory center.
Hi, Andy Pershing. I'm the Director of Climate Science with Climate Central. We're based in Princeton, New Jersey, and I feel like I must say that I grew up in Nebraska, so I have actually a reason to be here.
Missy Nergard, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I'm Meredith Perkins. I'm the Executive Director of Forest Relief of Missouri here out of St. Louis.
I'm Sammy Aaron with the Resilient Activist in Kansas City.
Samantha Wickham with a small intelligence company here in St. Louis. We don't do anything environmental or climate change, but I'd like to get more involved. That's why I'm here.
Hi, I'm Eileen Grassley. I live here in the St. Louis area, and I'm changing sectors from healthcare to sustainability and have a new degree and always love learning about initiatives.
Wanda Colo, I'm with St. Louis Zoo. I'm the Director of Sustainable Operations and Construction Management, and we are a member of the Collaborative. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here.
I'm Jess Watson. I'm the Executive Director at Earthly 365. We're an environmental nonprofit here in St. Louis, Missouri.
Good morning and welcome to all of you who are here from out of town. And good luck to the ones in Wisconsin who are trying with our day the weather is supposed to be today. So, fingers there. My name is Liz Rooney. I'm with Climate Reality, and I'm also part of the MCC Climate Agenda Research Agenda. And so we've been working for 4 months organizing review and all the questions that have been submitted by different universities and different partners for us to figure out what are the priorities for the region.
I'm Paula Scholl, mechanical engineer, retired from the energy business, now do volunteer work with climate in Evanston, Illinois, and also a member of the Research Agenda Working Group.
Everybody's gone? My name is Teresa Opheim. I'm with Climate Land Leaders. We're a group of farmland owners, and we're based in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, somewhat Illinois, and Dakotas. And I am from a very snowy Minneapolis. We've got 60 inches so far.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot of snow.
60 or
660. Well, welcome everyone. And we see that we have a diverse group of people from across the region, so that's great. And we thank you for taking the time to be here today. My name is Abigail Aderomu Omunu, and I am a postdoc at the International Center for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability here at WashU, and also affiliated with the Midwest Climate Collaborative and working on the research agenda. Today I have two co-presenters, Missy Neggard and Meredith Perkins. And as the conversation goes, I'll bring them up to share an example of what collaborative research looks like. So the theme for the workshop today is collaboration and co-production of knowledge for evidence-based research. We'll talk about the MCC's research agenda and knowledge synthesis, followed by an open conversation. And we'll want that conversation, to be engaging and interactive, talking about co-producing research with different members of the either academia or industry or community, using the NSF Civic Grant example. And then we'll break out into groups. I hope everyone has a group number. While you were walking in, did you pick one up? On either side of the doors.
I'll bring them around,
And we'll have the Zoom audience as one group. When we get there, we'll talk more about it. And so we'll break out into the groups to discuss the questions that we have received in the research agenda portal and provide feedback and comments on those. As you might have experienced, the definition of the Midwest differs depending on who you're talking with or who you're communicating with. But with the MCC, we're going with the definition by the Census Bureau of 12 states. So when we talk about the Midwest, with everything referring to the MCC project, we're looking at 12-state regions. Okay. So most, if not all of us, are familiar with the MCC. And so there are different projects that are ongoing, but today we're going to focus on the Midwest Climate Research Agenda. And we'll talk a lot about this project. But just for awareness, there are other projects like the Educator Community of Practice, the Student Sustainability Conference, the Climate Ambassadors Project, the Climate Asset Map, and Tracking Climate Commitments. And each of these projects are at different phases of progress. So the Climate Research Agenda is a multi-stage process of identifying trends in climate research in the Midwest, also including engaging with stakeholders to determine and define immediate and long-term research priorities for the region. And one of the co-organizations that we borrowed from is the Georgia Climate Project. And so our process is borrowed from the framework that they use. We adopted their framework, and we are appreciative of their support in sharing their process with us and being a call or email away to answer our questions as we develop the research agenda. In 2018, through a multi-sector collaborative effort, they developed also climate research priorities for the state of Georgia. And so they had academic partners, industry partners, community partners coming together and saying, what questions do we need to address to take action for climate impact in the state. And so we borrowed their framework and looking at it on the Midwest-wide perspective. And so you might ask the question, why do we need a climate research agenda? There is unlimited ideas, unlimited ideas of what research, can be done. But then we also know that there are limited resources. So whether it's time or people or the big one, funding, that's often limited, right? So it's important to prioritize our needs so that we're doing research that align with what's needed. And then those targeted research can also inform policy. So in recent times, there has been an uptick in certain research agendas across multiple fields, so not just in the climate space, right? Although these examples are climate specific, here in the US and also in Europe, just highlighting the idea that we're seeing more projects where researchers from academia are engaging with professionals and community members to do research that's needed in the community. And so the purpose of this collaborative research is to bridge the gap between research and practice. We recognize that sometimes this gap is created when there's a difference between what's useful and what's usable. So we have scenarios where the research might be either too theoretical for practice, or it's misinterpreted, or it's not applied rightly, right? So there's the case where right now we're having transdisciplinary research that involves co-production of knowledge and knowledge sharing, right? So that we're bringing practitioners and researchers to the same space, and we're talking to each other and saying, what are the needs, so that we're doing research that is actually actionable in the community. And so the aim of the MCC's research agenda is to develop an agenda that's focused on strategies that inform climate mitigation and adaptation in the Midwest in the coming years. And we're also looking to identify long-term climate research, and I'll explain that in a little bit. How many of us are familiar with this report? Okay. Dr. Sylvia Wood made reference to it in her keynote yesterday as well, right? This is the National Climate Assessment Report that is published every 5 years. And this is the last one that was published in 2018. And there are current efforts on the next one, the 5th Climate Assessment Report. And some of us might have been engaged in the public engagement part of it, where they were seeking comments from people about the report. And so how is this different or similar to what we're doing? On one hand, the geographic scale is different. In the Midwest, the Midwest and the National Climate Assessment reports, the geographic region is 9 states, and then with the Midwest Climate Collaborative, we're looking at 12 states. Okay, and the National Climate Assessment Report identifies trends in climate research in the region. And one thing we're also looking to do, or one thing that we've also done with the research agenda, is identify the trends in the region, as well as identify the gaps and collate all these questions from engaging with different sectors and different organizations, and looking at how those questions can be addressed within the research community, outside the research community, and anyone who's interested in doing climate work in the Midwest. So with that background, how does developing the climate research agenda look for us? In January 2022, when the collaborative officially launched, we hosted a workshop, a virtual workshop, where we engaged with people across, sectors as well, and we're asking, what will be a meaningful process to develop a research agenda that's inclusive, and we had people contribute, ideas and share recommendation of, how to go about the process, right? So in phase 1, concurrently, we were having developed a working group And some of them are here in the room, and some of them are online. And we'll talk about that working group in details in a little bit. And so we had a web-based question solicitation process, as well as a knowledge synthesis. The knowledge synthesis was tracking the trend of climate research in the Midwest from 2018 to 2021. And our start point was 2018 because that was when the last National Climate Assessment Report was published. So we're saying, okay, from that point to 2021, how much more climate research peer-reviewed research has been conducted in the region. And so we leaned into the working group to help circulate the question solicitation portal, connect us with people within their network, because we learned quickly that it was more efficient to leverage existing relationships, right? If you send a cold email or a cold call, the probability that you will get a response is slimmer than if somebody was making an introduction, right? So we leaned into the working group to make those connections as we reached out to different groups and organizations to help us with soliciting questions for the research agenda. The working group also helped identify people who will participate in the workshop and have helped to streamline and synthesize the questions that we have received so far, and also eventually contribute to writing the paper. And so in phase 2, I've talked a little bit about that already. We invited additional stakeholders. So a month ago, we organized a 2-day virtual event workshop where people were also weighing in on the questions that we had received in the portal and trying to identify, what the priorities were in the research agenda. So concurrently, like I mentioned earlier, we have the knowledge synthesis. And in knowledge synthesis, we're tracking trends of research across the region, right? And so through consulting with one of the research librarians in WashU, we developed this search process where we're looking at research that references climate or climate adaptation or vulnerability, all of these search strings for all the states in the region. And as you will imagine, we had so many articles that were spooled out. But we had a selection criteria that was developed. Excuse me. We had a selection criteria that was developed about what to include and what to exclude from that process. And so if the research had to do with any of the states in the Midwest, it was included. If it had to do with climate, it was included. And then the categories that we used were also the categories from the National Climate Assessment. So we're looking at agriculture, biodiversity and ecosystems, transportation and infrastructure, human health, and communities. So those were the categories that we were interested in. And using this criteria to say, okay, this makes the cut or this doesn't make the cut. And so we had about 1,378 articles that we reviewed, or that were reviewing their full text. And there are 2 independent researchers that are going through this process, right? And so in this process right now, there's consensus between the 2 researchers about the included and excluded categories. So 138 articles are included, 237 are excluded. We're working on resolving the conflicts in the 500 articles, and then 470 have been partially reviewed. And so I'll be talking about the trend that we've observed in the 138 articles that have been that have been included in the process, right? So from 2018 to 2021, we see a variation in the number of articles across these years. In 2018, there were 21 articles. In 2021, there's 43. And you see the dip in 2020 with 29 articles. Just want to highlight that these numbers are going to change as we complete the knowledge synthesis process, right? So we also wanted to extract information about how much research is being done in the adaptation space, in climate impacts or mitigation. And as we can see from the graph, there's a whole lot more on climate impact, right? And I'll speak to the flip side of what we're observing in the research agenda part of it. So like, okay, in all of these states, what region or what state has the most number of climate research being done? And like I mentioned again, these numbers are going to change as we complete the process. But right now, Minnesota has the most research on climate research. So you might ask, okay, so what are the questions that are being addressed, right? Biodiversity and agriculture have the most number of research. And agriculture is not a surprise, right? Thinking that the Midwest is an agricultural hub, right? So there's definitely a lot of research being done in this space. And this information is important because what we're also trying to identify are the gaps, what research needs to be included, right? So that we're addressing needs across a broad spectrum. So if we remember, as many people who were at the keynote presentation yesterday, Dr. Sylvia Wood, talked about climate change and health impacts among vulnerable communities. And one of the things that we're recognizing or we're identifying is that there is not a lot of research in this space, and then the research agenda is addressing that. Okay. So the categories that have the less amount of research right now from our review are transportation and infrastructure, human health, and communities. And so with the web-based question solicitation, we had these questions that as prompts for people to think about, what questions they wanted to contribute to the portal. So what research question, if answered, will suitably advance our understanding of climate impact and solutions across diverse sectors and populations in the US Midwest? And what question, if answered, will help you do the climate action work you need to do? So those were the questions those were the prompts that we had in the portal, and just to help people think about what questions they wanted to contribute. And so this is a list of the people who have helped or volunteered in the working group, and some of them are here in the room, and some, like I mentioned, some of them are online. Just want to give them a shout out. It's a lot of work, in the background, putting all of this together. I also wanted to highlight that they come from different sectors, as we can see by the logo, right? So it's academia folks, folks in the NGO space, in industry as well, right? Cutting across all of these sectors to say, how do we work together, to co-produce knowledge for evidence-based research? So there is different means of, communicating and engaging, whether on Zoom or through emails or phone calls, and also going to spaces, to already existing conferences and meeting people where they are. So in the summer, we went to Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota. And personally, for me, that was a great experience to drive across the Midwest and just experience just other places outside of Kansas City and St. Louis that I'm familiar with, right? So meeting people where they are to connect and have these questions contributed to the portal. I also want to highlight that in contributing these questions, we engage with different organizations. So for example, locally we have the ZMD group, which is a group of the zoo, the Botanical Garden, and the History Museum. We spoke with people from the USGBC Council, just different organizations, right, who are also interested in climate work across the region, contributed to the questions in the portal. So where did these questions come from? Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Ohio, South Dakota, Virginia, and Washington State. And you might say, oh, but those 2 states are not in the Midwest. How come, right? But those questions were contributed from people who have a regional or national work. So even though they were locally based in this state, their work was also cutting across the Midwest. And so there's also representation from education, local government, private sector, and nonprofit. And these were people engaged in advocacy, agriculture, built environment, so just seeing a broad range of representation of people in contributing questions to the portal. And so what does the research agenda look like in numbers? We had over 200 questions contributed into the portal. Some of those questions, were similar. And so that's where the working group came in, synthesizing these questions. What are questions that are the same? And what are questions that need to be reframed? Because the questions that were put in as statements, and so like reframing them and just reorganizing into a different space. And so we trimmed down those questions, and in January we had the virtual workshop where we called in different stakeholders to say, okay, these are the questions we have received so far. What should rise? What should the priorities be, and what are other questions that might not have been identified that need to be included in the research agenda? And so that was that process of working together with different stakeholders. And so we have an example from the NSF and Civic grant. And I'll pass it on to Meredith and Missy, I'm sorry, to just share an example of what that looks like in process, in practice. And we're opening that up for conversation as well. From your example with working, in this space, what does it look like doing collaborative research in this space?
Good morning. I'm Missy Niergaard from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and just a quick background on this NSF Civic Grant. It's been evolving. Stage 1 was awarded this fall, and since we were able to move forward with it, Heather gathered 4 communities from across the Midwest to put in our Stage 2 grant. And it has been really an extraordinary experience. So the grant is about urban tree canopies, developing urban tree canopies in the communities, and there's a whole other session on that. I keep looking at Matt up there from CARPC, because part of what I wanted to talk about today was connections. So at a university, it's really hard to figure out who does what. So I often have to go outside the university to figure out who's doing what inside the university. And I just noticed this on a slide that Abigail just put up, that Michaela Callis from UW-Madison was part of the research group. I had no idea, so I'll be reaching out to her when I get there. So one of the things that I think the MCC enables is those connections. So I got involved with CARPC, Matt's colleague, Mike Rupiper. CARPC is the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. Is it commission or committee? Commission, thank you. Working on a watershed project in Dane County, Wisconsin. And then Heather reached out and said, hey, we're putting together this urban tree canopy group. Do you have anyone at Madison? And it turns out we did have someone on Madison that was working on Mike's team. So she is a graduate student. So I reached out to her. They needed a letter of support. That's the first time I learned that there was this thing going on. So they didn't know who to go to at the university. They come to me. This would be the wildest game of ping pong because there would be people all over the place tossing balls at each other. So we get the letter in, and then Heather is like, who else at the university is working on these things? And I said, I don't know. And then a couple days later, I was out having an adult beverage with our community relations director. And she said, hey, have you seen the work that Kai-Ping Chan is doing around community engagement with our Black and Brown communities on urban tree canopies? And I said, no, that is amazing. So one of the things that Kai-Ping has done, and one of the things that the university enabled, is a geographical location in a redlined district in the city of Madison that has brought people together. So we created a space that's called the South Madison Area Partnership. And Brenda facilitates that space. And our community researchers go out there and bring the community in. And that's how we made those connections. So the other thing about researchers is that they are highly specialized. It's not like a researcher is going to come and say, yes, I want to work on that. It's going to have to further their own research agenda. Likely they're going to have to be able to write grants off of it, and they're definitely going to have to be able to publish. So we have thousands of researchers across the Midwest, and what the MCC enables is us to identify researchers in particular areas that may not be, WashU may not have someone that's doing Kai-Ping's research. So Kai-Ping, for this grant, is writing the protocols for this community engagement across all 4 communities. This is an area of specialty she has. The other thing that she has done with the help of the NSF team is to compensate, at least right into the grant, to compensate community members for their expertise. They're not just volunteering their time, they are experts in their community, and to treat them as the people in their community, just like we get compensated for doing this, was a really important part of Kai-Ping's research and an important part of the grant. So yeah, building the networks and working with each other to find out where we have all these hidden connections. So Meredith.
So I feel a little bit like a fish out of water here. I have an undergraduate degree in forestry and have been practicing urban forestry for the last 20 plus years now. And when Heather Navarro came to me and said, hey, we're going to do this civic grant on urban tree canopy, I was like, we absolutely want to be in the room because there's all these things that we need. There's all these things that we rely on research for to get the work done and get the boots on the ground. And knowing that there was this collaborative that was regionally focused, that was looking at particular climate in the Midwest, particular issues and challenges that we're facing, and solutions that we could rely on with data that was from our local partners, is a game changer for us as we start promoting and investing. When you're investing in urban tree canopy, you're looking at the long game. So if we know what we're doing today is going to be impactful and make a difference in a community, it's going to make a difference 20 years from now. And we're the ones putting those baby trees and telling the community members that we're engaging, hey, this is going to be an asset for your community. This is going to be important for your air quality. This is going to be something that when you give your house to your kids, it's going to be a better place. But the reality is sometimes we run up against a lot of challenges. We're getting feedback that says, well, that tree is not an asset, it's a liability. Well, we have challenges around managing those trees. Well, we don't have a place to plant those trees. And so there's this great disconnect between what we should do and what we know academically, urban tree canopy in vulnerable communities where there's high urban heat island, that's the place where we should plant the trees. And then we have all of these really logistical problems that the doers on the ground are looking at and saying, well, we can't plant in a parking lot. Well, we can't plant a tree where no one's going to take care of it. Well, we can't give that community something that they don't want. And so it's been a really interesting collaborative approach through this civic grant because we're getting, big data, we're getting local data, and then we're getting this sort of conversation around what is that data doing for us and how are we able to implement that into real change and real impact. So I think the structure of this NSF civic process has been really enlightening for people like us, nonprofits on the ground. A couple of things I would say from a pros standpoint, and as we start seeing more of this collaborative approach with partners and researchers and practitioners and nonprofits, is understanding the power of the togetherness. As we look at being competitive for big national grants and IRA funding coming down the way, our group is identifying that even if what we do in this civic process right now is focused around a particular research agenda question or a particular thing, building this network of collaborators together and who are kind of laser focused on these problems is going to tee us up for a lot more momentum and opportunity in the future. So I think as we start looking in our own kind of little fiefdoms, understanding that landscape scale impact where we're not relying on data that came from California or New York, but what is happening here will not only answer the research questions that we're doing today, but also really give us power to answer questions down the road. The other thing for us that I think is really powerful is having those connectors. Missy mentioned who does what, knowing that we can go to different research professionals and knowing, oh, okay, we can ask Jay Turner for his information on air quality here at WashU, or we can ask for, partner information in Wisconsin. And so when we are curious or we need particular data, we can go there. But there's, I guess my role too, and I told Heather, I was like, it's important to talk about how it's hard. From our perspective, I said, absolutely, we want to be in this. We want to be a partner. We want to participate. And then we're looking at 2-hour meetings every week. We're looking at conversations around all these different things and side hustles and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's March and we're planting trees tomorrow. So we don't always have the same capacity or the same work structure. And we're not alone. We have a nonprofit structure where I'm an executive director and we can do that. But when we get down into that community engagement level too, we want that community support. We have to understand that we don't necessarily, the priorities and the time frame doesn't always support it, but the research is going to keep going. So how do we balance understanding that we might not get all the impact that we need, or that you all might not get all the information you need because we're out, plowing ahead, doing what we think is best based on whatever is out there and available. So the time intensive part of it is, I think, a big challenge. And then I think the other part is we start, looking at these research agendas in collaboration. There's a lot of compromise that happens. We had a lot of conversations early on around where I thought this whole process was going to go, and it's going in kind of a different direction. And so it is also a little bit, there's a lot of give and take. And I think communicating that up front when you're working with community partners and nonprofits is, we want to talk about and get your feedback, but we might not get to the pilot project stage on, expanding soil volume for street trees that you want, because we gotta acknowledge that we have to have researchers that are interested in doing that work. We have to acknowledge that the funding structure is in a way that has particular priorities and things that are required in order for us to be competitive for this grant cycle. So all the limitations around academic structure also sometimes puts nonprofit partners in a bit of a bind, because we're like, wait a second, we thought we were going to get all this great pilot project work, and we can't do that in a year, and I can't show that trees are changing, asthma rates tomorrow or next year. So we got to wait on the stuff that we feel like, oh, well, maybe that's, where we need to be to move the needle. So I think that constant compromise and those constant conversations around understanding what needs to happen today, and then communicating how that research is really going to be relevant and valuable for the partners that are on the ground doing that work in the moment has been it's been fun, I think, to kind of see that collaboration come together. And I would just end by saying that I think, in urban forestry and tree canopy in general, we are seeing a windfall right now in people saying, trees are the answer. We can get environmental justice, we can get urban heat island, we can get air quality improvements, we can get beautification, we can get economic. It's the song that we're singing in urban forestry, but it's the research that you all are doing in these spaces that are helping us kind of save face and communicate exactly what we are able to do and what that kind of vision for what we're investing in is going to produce in reality, so that we don't feel like we're just singing sunshine songs to everybody, and giving them the kitchen sink. But we can say, no, we know based on this that here in your neighborhood, it is going to do this if we do X, Y, and Z. And so having those facts really helps us make the right investments up front and then be true to the partners and the people that are investing with us. So the process has been really good. I don't know how we want to.
I got one more comment.
Yeah,
Actually,
please.
were you on the call about the research question?
I thought it was really relevant, especially since we're talking about research questions. One of the probably most heated meetings with this group and the community members was a community member like, I don't care about the research question. I need this done. And the scientists are like, we need to write this grant exactly like this. So that conflict and tension is real, and this whole process will help inform future processes for all of us. So before I turn it back to Abigail, who else needs a little number for breaking out into discussion? I saw people sneak in. Does anyone, who does not have a little cardboard thing? All right. I'm going to come around and hand them to you. Thank you. Everybody?
Thank you so much, Missy and Meredith, for sharing your perspectives from that example. There are different words that, as I was listening to them, came to my mind, and they all start with C. Right? There's connections, collaboration, communication, and compromise. Right. So as we think about doing collaborative research and bringing people together in the same room and saying, how can we work together to move, climate work forward? Those are things that we need to think about. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I'm looking at time and looking at what the next thing that we want to be engaged in. We're going to share some of the questions and research ideas that we pulled together, the working group and the workshop participants, the virtual workshop participants pulled together, and we're going to break out into groups, and that's why you have those cards with numbers in it. And so we'll take 30 minutes to look at those questions, discuss them in your groups, and then provide comments and feedback. The working group is needing, just another layer of feedback and comments from your expertise and your experience. And so in your different groups, discuss those questions and write on this paper stuck on the wall that you can write on. And then we'll have one person from each group after 30 minutes come to report out. And the Zoom group will share a link to the questions in the chat in a little bit. And you can also have that conversation going on Zoom. And then you provide your feedback and your comments using the chat option. And so we'll have group 1 over here to my left, group 2 at the far end, group 3 at the corner over there, and group 4 to my right.
You're voluntold.
So,
Paul, got your number?
yeah,
What number?
we have to coordinate with numbers.
What do you want me to have?
1 to 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4.
I could take your time too, if you want to. 3, 4.
Well, I was with the I just came from something. I help facilitate that launch.
Yeah, we can do
I'm Jessie Oliver.
That's a good way to.
Yeah, so you're a farmer.
No, I'm not. I am not sure.
Okay, but you work on behalf of landowners. You have
Yeah, landowners, some of them are farming themselves, and some are non-operating.
Got it.
I don't know, I'm not sure.
Ellen, do you also want?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Recognize you, so.
I'm with our state recruiter.
Volunteers.
Okay.
Okay. Keep an eye on the group.
Our volunteer.
Or a great boy anthem.
So my friend and I saw you at the. Yes. Really? And she's just like a landlord. And we're in two EPA grants currently in partnership. Yeah, I mean, weekly meeting is way more than I expected, even just as a subboard. So, yeah. And yeah, it's really important. And if you were to do it nonprofit.
I am.
It's still important, but like, it's just a little.
Take a section.
So, and yours is a nonprofit.
You're nonprofit, and then you're, are you with Thornton here in?
We'll take biodiversity.
I just completed degree in biodiversity.
Oh, great.
Building.
Yeah, career change.
Because you're coming from.
Healthcare, yeah.
That's a great look at.
It is. I was a therapist, so when I see it.
Oh, trifecta. There you go.
So much of what work, I feel like my background on that. We're in that healthcare lead now. As far as the.
Okay. So, everybody remember their respective sections?
Mental health is very related to
5 to 7 minutes.
Sorry, I'm ignorant.
Yes.
Personally, I'm most interested in looking at the building.
I want to get to the meeting. How about other?
And you're developing a green campus, which I love.
I guess I'm interested in.
And you're working on it, working on it.
You're in this
Because I
area.
told you,
I'm
we're
a
going
nonprofit
to
environmental.
Yeah, okay. And are you around here too?
Yeah, so what's that by
Tree.
Oh, we do
Your
your
state, right?
state.
But we do most of our.
Sure. Start there.
Distribute trees at no charge to.
So, and how long is
So I am a little confused about the review research question. Is this it? Is this what we're reviewing?
Yeah. I mean, the way I read it is, how do you know what questions need to be answered by?
What state are you from?
So,
I was gonna say, let's see.
I know, where was your?
I mean, that's probably the
Alright, you lead agriculture.
Okay, that's why we came here, because we figured there would be no farmers here. We wanted to.
So is the goal of this, them getting feedback to kind of winnow down some of these, or what are they hoping in terms of what they're receiving?
whatever feedback we can give, I would think they're looking for, this one doesn't make sense, or this one is.
Active note taker.
Wonderful.
clarification on that's actually really like.
I can.
Answering like 2 or 3 questions out of the list.
This question.
Well, we are.
Do you want us to write on this one or we're gonna need to, or how do you want to?
Well, we only choose
Oh, up here? Okay, got it.
that we can.
I can look at the agriculture questions and we'll provide separate feedback.
Oh, we can talk about it. I didn't mean to exclude you.
One of the.
Wait, tell me, can you just? Tell me, okay, I can get a timer going.
Yeah, so we're a group of farmland owners, some of them farm, some of them farmland is owned 40 to 50. Sometimes one, and
Need a minute to.
not operating landowners, some owners who own, right now we have about 25,000 acres. And they are submitted to an conservation on the land. Which is, on some questions, in the ag area, how much something that is questioned by various practices in soil.
I actually.
Is that one of the questions?
I was gonna say, you gotta take that one. Morning. Hi.
Okay, great. I didn't really have a chance to carefully, but they're very much about mitigation and so we can provide. Sure. Continuing.
Well, I did see some questions that I highlighted. I have a little bit of background in sustainable agriculture. And it looked like there was some focus on non-conventional management practices to build resilience, including cover cropping, reduced tillage, organic farming, regenerative agriculture, and crop diversification. Number 5 seems interesting to me. There's also alternative crops beyond the major crops, number 13. So those seem to kind of push us beyond the corn and soybean area. And then for us, I mean, we do very, very little related to, but a little related to food because we run kind of a challenge, the Green Guidelines, which helps to strengthen the food system and connect the restaurants and farmers. And so the urban agriculture, how urban agriculture, how will urban agriculture really impact time change for BIPOC farmers and our small and mid-sized farmers, number 15. So yeah, those are ones that also stuck out, just a separate question or and solutions.
Yeah.
So you were saying that
I think so. I'm seeing them.
Yeah, because,
document. I don't know if they're like.
You get to bring it.
I feel like there's
This is lovely. Are you doing other activities?
I'm going to the Mississippi programs. There's
between traditional systems
It said they were focused in the Arctic. Oh, look at behind the scenes with penguins.
Huge climate question, not all land.
Looking at this.
What, it's when are you driving people, or when are you lifting up the system to make it better, if I'm saying, oh, okay, you can justify different things, have you considered trees?
Whether
Are we getting to our climate goals, or we just kind of moving things around, make our ourselves feel better, exactly. How do carbon offsets get us to water sustainability, carbon,
from, or other farming might be, either way, or how our farming practices affect
that for each company, and if you
So,
have
three is more, or four is more rare.
cross
Three is more resolution, but
places,
we need to
come along
do
here.
I think more is more of the environmental impact, community impact of water quality. And then there obviously, you know, there's a basic question of like the carbon credits, but I think also like how to access carbon credits, because the people who can actually access them right now are not small, like nonprofits or a lot of the practitioners that are doing the climate work, but there's still large corporations or, you know, cities or things like that in the process of carbon credits. Would that be other communities?
Yeah, I didn't realize we needed.
Okay, all right, that's what I have.
And small and mid-sized farmers and farmers
Let's start with
credits. So they're really very large in our part of the country. So corn and soybeans, we crop pieces, $40 an acre.
Yeah. So I'll try to summarize the question and then we're right there. I think we're going to be done questions. So which questions did you choose? There we go.
Why? Scale of corn and soybeans, everybody gravitated toward working with
You know what I mean? Well, I know, but I'm saying, so let's go to the other I can squeeze over if you want to just.
Oh, no, I could just do it. Just too hard to write.
Oh, yeah.
So you said number
2, 6, and 7 all are sort of thematically linked, so it just feels like this should be next to each other.
Notes could be put in a research question specifically. I'm gonna try to, wondering if there could be something that kind of ties different stakeholders together and see how they kind of work together to work solutions like government. So, I don't know how to put that into research.
Okay, well, yeah, we work on wording later, but, add a question.
What are their roles?
So I put you to number 12. How do we actually make change?
Right.
It's a meta question.
And who's involved in water? Right. I didn't even read that one. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, so that's that's mainly so like my kids, yeah, so like
Seems like
They want to be back, they don't know it down, questions from all of us that even see that they can process and they're having fun about and asking them different questions or what's missing, like we've been talking about, kind of prioritizing. So we don't need to, right?
Okay.
I'm from EPA, I struggle with that. So here are the problems, government coming in and particular big demands that they're not.
Yeah, my question was, so 15 years ago,
Lots of interest
Yes.
Is there anything else you guys want to add on the ag? Should we highlight like some question clearing about interest and visit down, perennial crops?
Would that be a part of the stakeholder process? Would it be a multi-part?
Really hard to look at what you're.
Put down, as you mentioned, 12, 13.
I've never seen an
Should we jump to the next one, or?
And if you want to come up and.
Any other last call for agriculture? Alright. Biodiversity.
If you could come up and introduce yourself.
I would put on the transparency.
You guys, no, you have to introduce yourself. Matt.
Questions about carbon sequestration.
Yeah, and it's not just transparency, it's.
As well, so I love how they phrase it.
And your name again?
And the resilience.
Yeah.
And just confidence, right, is what you're looking for, like the confidence of the research to know, like, okay, this isn't just a assumption, but like.
Yeah, I'm just, in case somebody can find somebody. Yeah, and there's a, you know, you get. So the first like this.
And I forget the term. I know the native speaker, like, they think they're always wonder. Well, with native in Chicago, 10 years ago, now, you know, southern species are becoming more prevalent. How do we make sure that we're accounting for different species representation?
So you want to make sure the question number one is emphasized, is that?
I'm just
Or
making
do
it
you want
counter.
to?
I just like, I just like it, I think that's a good question.
Do you think it should be expanded to include, like, the
Yeah, maybe to include adaptation of through.
In other words, what's a native species now, 10 years down the road, is, what's a native species and not native.
Well, even naturalized species could still be beneficial right here too, so if
So just below, like, you know.
What's that area called? There's a lot of social science coming up on sort of the.
I really like number 11 because we've had some just horrific flash floods and what we can do to whatever, you know, we're starting to other mitigation strategies to do something around the flash floods.
Or some very specific things, about what, we know we can over trees, but we also know that people don't want to spend money on this, or that funding for parks. The straight tree is the lowest rate of investment So we're starting to see, it's like, oh yeah, I love trees, but like,
Doesn't
let's just not.
necessarily matter if they're all ginkgo trees that do nothing. So what reminds us of trees, I think, is an important thing, but it adds to that.
Okay, that's great.
It seems like
with climate change, we're getting these outbreaks of just very intense flooding. The Deer Creek watershed is just.
For me, questions 6 and 9 felt similar. Because maybe it's just not my.
Well, today, this morning, driving in, your trails and yes, right. What does it take? Does it take I know cities are not necessarily in the city. And so is it like, you have this one right on number 10, I don't know if it's the same words, so I don't know if you want to. When I think about what money is out there, because I'm also wondering what kind of assistance, not only what is out there, what is free.
And also how to increase the awareness.
Right.
I feel like that's the problem.
Right.
There's money out there and nobody knows about it.
Right, and so, yeah, you know, research. And I think there are some barriers to like getting more grants for these things. The like 30-year time frame to assessment of these health once a year. Like not a lot has been made to make that condition.
So I noticed you typing to them on the chat. I don't think they can reply in Zoom. Because the whole thing was going through a different software, but if you don't have a moderator in here, there's no one to get through to that. So I'll just enable the Zoom chat here, and then they should be able to share.
It's just sort of.
That's the incentive.
So you guys want to record this anywhere? You had mentioned competing research.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to record like with the tree plantings that.
What other ideas?
I think that could go under the question.
Yeah, so whoever set up this event was having it all filtered through a third-party software, so they told us to disable the chat. But it should be good now.
Basically just sort of steal that question for
That question should be in there.
everything.
Yeah. Number 11 on the something about land use and tree planting, urbanization and flooding as the example of recent connected with health. Not very developed as a question, but maybe we could help them with question that relates to.
Was there social barriers to, is there more research into social barriers?
Yeah. Maybe, I think we know what these social barriers are. I think that's where we're at the practitioner.
Okay. If last supervisors
All right, building and transportation, yeah. I didn't realize some building. Yes. How do we?
well, you know what, originally they were together. And then we had so many questions on energy that we were afraid we would never get. During the workshops, I guess. And now I'm trying to think of building and transportation.
Okay, so we should.
Incentives.
I mean, we can look at energy as well, but this one has
More time has been focused on energy.
yeah.
Now we know what to do, how I do. So. Even when there are bike lanes. Talk about an important basic question, like, do we have research already? I mean, there's been all of this like collating work that I've gone into, figuring out what's been published and what is.
We have 5 more minutes.
Have the research, like, we should be focusing on.
As you begin to consolidate, then you can choose someone to report out from each of the groups.
And the policy. So that as like a major overarching feedback might be very useful here.
That's a good one.
They actually have a curve that protects bystanders.
And we're trying to lock that.
I think they may be trying to put them on to help with implementation of
It's nice to see that.
whether it's buses,
Whether it's climate.
I didn't really see that. The other thing I saw this, I know, there are a lot of cities, including my own, are potential for eliminating natural gas connections using construction. California. Evansville is starting to California has really looked at it, Massachusetts has looked at it.
Being like, okay, what are the
What actually works is there's so many objections to it, and
everybody could do.
the developers, the construction industry, equipment industry.
Thank you.
So, what resources are available for help?
But there's also.
And,
500 out there. Location is planting baby trees that won't grow. What are those indicators
You're a
I want to understand climate change, social barrier. Is there also research on, I guess, these changes? Like, so, for example, you talked about the gas, the stove, like, I understand in California, where their grid is relatively green, it makes sense to have a, electric stove. Here, there are so coal, and you want to keep them if you switch from a gas stove to coal stove, is that actually helping? So maybe it's part of that.
Everything I've seen in that area is focused on the lobby. Eventually we'll get there and it'll be worth switching, but that's quite.
And then the state of Illinois has a, and then how do we, they need to create the plans, our grids are, you mentioned that, like, it's like, that's something that, oh, I was. Okay, yeah, we talked earlier, just the last on how to provide a natural I noticed that, they really like.
And I think that is somewhat covered in the energy area, especially with regard to as climate change happens and heat and cold and things how do we meet that is so it's kind of like
And are heat pumps covered in energy or? And I don't see them at all. There's a huge changeover in heat pumps from, especially in the northeast.
Has a system restoration.
I think an issue there is like a career shift is needed in a lot of parts. It's normally focused on like a natural gas system, residential homes, and just something I've seen in my job is that there's not many trained electricians in the area that will do like supply and
What are you looking at the number one water usage?
Right? Because he doesn't want all water, he is the input to the output.
The output too.
tankless water meters, that's not.
Okay. No, very, so you might
That could all be under water
have.
usage.
I just expanded on that question, maybe.
Can we decide who from each of the groups will report out as we try to bring it all together?
No, it's in Iowa, it's especially that one meeting, so you just have to say wild weather with.
My question is like, what are the most registered candidates? Like, just from a local government standpoint.
What are the biggest divisions and then how do you?
Yeah, like, I mean, we know what our biggest issues are, and what policies have like implementation. I've seen similar research done in UC Berkeley, but that's based on California, and obviously they're in a totally different landscape.
For us to develop new materials, because we cannot rely on just solid metal.
Climate change and also.
So I focused on.
What we do, and I think that's another part, it's another how to change, what you have system, what does our base population look like, knowing that we are.
I do like that.
In a state, public transportation.
So
Really tough.
So one thing, there are political challenges.
The train across Missouri.
Good conversation.
Not being allowed to.
Whatever.
I try to go to Chicago all the time.
Has said.
It's just like, well, it's expensive, but the last time I showed up for a lecture, I was delayed 8 hours.
I think we have like any systems. It's a good time.
I think the world has. What it actually.
My tree's not.
Also, new products and services for
It's very unhealthy. I think it has like a really slow
Part of the answer is where you build back.
Hey, group one, who's your representative?
Are we supposed to be lighting on the wall?
Yeah.
Number 6, there needs to be more investment.
Mitigation and resilience. Like that's really what that are focusing on.
This is one of my responsibilities.
You're like, I think you picked it up and put it in.
The one standing up.
I think you were just nominated, Eileen.
Precipitation changes.
To probably make the most sense. All these.
Could you put down,
I mean, I think like
I can't all the questions, I went through everything really.
but I'm just process of translation. Integrating.
Yeah, we're good, we're very good. I feel like we'll try.
We'll do our best.
Okay, let's all come together. I know there's a great conversations going on. One more minute. Okay. Go ahead.
We got some really good ideas.
I'm from Iowa, I live in Indiana.
You did not, oh, yeah.
Nice to meet everyone's different perspectives.
You know, like how do we get to, don't worry about this, like, it feels like there's a lot of bureaucracy. It's like, I was like,
Yeah.
you know, I got trees, you got energy, you got, it's like, you know, like, everybody's coming from their own thing, and they try to figure out a way all of it, actually, it's just all of it.
It's all.
And then it just gets to the, that's a major barrier for the parent. That you try to remove the silos, and then you remove the silos, and then everyone's like, you're right, no, my thing, you're doing your thing, we're not together, we're together, we're like, part of the process.
You know, I was just talking to Sherry about, I think what I really do, your members. I go to yours, and there's a link at the bottom, and I'm telling you, we're gonna do, and then there's links also organizations. And then some takes you to universe, and we're spend like 10 hours identifying stars and planets. But just like that, all of it.
You wish for that?
To start having to do redundancies.
Okay, we're going to start with group 1 while the other groups try to synthesize.
All right, so we focused on 3 of these areas: agriculture, biodiversity, and building and transportation. I'll try to go through this quickly, so I'm going to ignore lots of little comments we had. In agriculture, we wanted to add a question that was about how to convene stakeholders together to come up with solutions. Who are the stakeholders, and how to engage with government, as well as a question about how does climate change related to agriculture affect community health and economics. On the biodiversity side of things, we really liked question 1 and wanted to really emphasize sort of defining native species sort of for each area and what naturalized species are helpful in light of, you know, shifting species ranges. For question 11, we thought it was important to not just talk about tree canopy, but what kind of trees. Different trees are good for, say, water management or ecosystem services. And then for building and transportation, we wanted to add questions about what resources are available for things like electrification and biofuels, and resources for heat pumps and things like tankless water, as well as sort of training the workforce to really help expand some of these changes. Okay.
Great comment. Group 2.
Yeah, so for group 2, we were able to attack the different subjects here. So I'll just give one key point from each one. So for agriculture, one of the key points from my colleague Emily was, you know, there'll be increased droughts and flooding, and the infrastructure and knowledge for farmers to keep more of the water on their farm. For biodiversity ecosystems, Matt and Gail, we talked about, you know, loss of tree canopy and lack of knowledge of native trees is a challenge. And so providing, actually, a really important point that I liked here was working with industry to provide more diverse trees and plants to ensure the biodiversity is there. So when somebody goes to, you know, their local nursery, that they can be sure that they're getting plants that are good for the environment in which they live. So for buildings and transportation with Sam, we talked about road safety and the stigma when it comes to pedestrians and cyclists. And I think a lot of people forget when they get their license that pedestrians always have the right of way, no matter what. People just tend to forget that, but that is true. For communities, Kelly, one thing she talked about that was interesting to us was, you know, who is interested in the community but may not know where to begin, right? So if you know where interest is there, you know that there's work to be done. So making sure you tie where the interest is to the work that needs to be done, in which, whether it's you or another colleague can help begin that part. I worked on energy because that's what I love. And so, the political challenge in jurisdictions on allowing electrification, a lot of that has been preempted by our state. So we need to find some ways to move forward with that in a positive way. And also, new products and services be introduced. So, entrepreneurs to produce new products and services for customers, whether they're local, regional, national, or, international. And then health, Sammy, she talked about mental health, right? So making sure that we have good access to mental health, and not necessarily just from practitioners, but the environment providing that for us, right? Because that betters our physical health as well. So, the effects of, urban heat island effects, so infant mortality, domestic violence, and also the benefits of spending time outdoors, of course, better cardiovascular health, better safety, and just a better, long, fruitful life in general. So thank you from Group 2.
Thank you, Group 2.
All right, so we jumped around a little bit. We started with one, and then we went to the back and worked our way front. So these are just a few kind of our high-level discussions. So one is that we felt like there were some missing questions, or there's some questions around just basic climate processes, especially understanding extremes of temperature and precipitation, and how they connect to then the impacts that are discussed. So there was some work there, especially on the ag side. We had a lot of discussion in a number of the sections, health, communities, even a little bit in energy around just how do you capture as a science question the issue of around cultural and behavioral change. And so just recognizing that a lot of the questions here are they're almost more like, this is what we want to do, like we need to do the work. We have, especially those of us in NGOs, kind of want to get out and do the work versus what could a more of a research agenda look like to inform that work. So trying to understand the process by which you get to cultural and behavioral changes, trying to understand trusted messengers in different communities, trying to understand the process of individual action behavioral change. Does that lead to the bigger societal changes that we ultimately need to address climate change? A couple of things, we plus one to the discussion of mental health. We thought that was a very interesting area and a topic that could be expanded a lot in this region, and highlighted that a lot of the work has been done internationally, and there's a need for more research specific to this region. And then just one last point, a few things that we noticed that are missing. We didn't see a lot about food security and water security, which we thought was kind of interesting in this region, given how important food and water is, both as a production. And then just kind of resiliency issues generally. I think there's some neat stuff that could be done. So I'll turn it over to Group 4.
Thank you.
We had some of the same themes, but we overall thought mitigation and resilience were the things that were connecting our thoughts. So we started with agriculture, and we did have a little flow of thoughts since they're all interconnected, so I recorded them in that way. So we talked about carbon sequestration and having a good look at that process and having it be transparent to see who are the biggest people using that and what are they doing, and have some comparisons across crops. And then we also talked about priorities. We thought that was related to 12 and 13. We added the thoughts about cover crops and prairie strips in as part of resilience, and also helping with things like erosion and soil quality. We had someone here with energy expertise, so we talked about things related to question 10 and 3 on green rooftops and the multiple benefits of that. Also, that you can do native plantings under solar and even food production underneath them, and also a double win in that area. So a lot of the thought was paying back nature for the space that you're taking, even for solar energy and things like that. This integrating indigenous knowledge, I think, could be helpful in any of the areas, so we wanted to make sure to put that into our list. We talked a lot about communities and looking at competing research when you're prioritizing and what you're going to make decisions on. The social implications and policies related to the decisions that you're making are important, especially with consistent messaging and what's required and doesn't require a debate. We looked at number 9, encouraging people to do things that have the biggest impacts, either individuals or community. And thought number 2 was huge, to know your research and, know your research and the need to apply data to it so that you have something sound to back your decisions up. Last of all, biodiversity was kind of a thread that we talked about with all of our questions here, but we especially thought were important native plants, consistent messaging on use of them, and the benefits that they provide, like for the soil, erosion, healthcare, food webs, or human health and animal health. So that could be a theme underlying a lot of the resilience and solutions because native networks help each other out.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great contribution and feedback. I know that we are, limited by time, and we could have more robust conversation around this question. But I also want to highlight some of the comments that came from the Zoom chat. And my apologies to the group on Zoom. We had some technical challenges, and I apologize that it didn't go as smoothly as we thought it would go. So Christy says that I think there is a lot of opportunity for more questions within the building, transportation, and communities categories. A lot of important things missing. Research focused on stormwater management, natural bank stabilization, water retention, and so on. And then Tara says, I'd like to see more on natural and nature-based flooding solutions, how to prioritize social and environmental justice for different climate change impacts. So thank you, everyone, for the feedback and the comments you've provided on these questions. We're going to bring all of this back to the working group as the process of synthesizing, the research agenda still continues. And if you're interested in continuing to engage with the process, you may reach out to us. We really would appreciate that. And if you have, people that you think, their inputs would also be valuable to that process, please feel free to make those connections. We're wanting to get as much, input as possible as we put these together. And I know that we're way beyond our time, but I also wanted to say that if I can go to my next slide, yeah. I'll be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the other team who's been working behind the scenes, throughout this process. The WashU team, David and Beth are here. Thank you. I'm providing, just support and advice through this process. And Heather and Chris Weatherly isn't here, but he's also supporting with the knowledge synthesis part of the project. And initially we had Sejal, who's an undergrad at WashU, also, support this effort. And countless people, behind the scenes, like we talked about earlier, it's a collaborative effort, and there's so many people just doing great work to see this come together. So thank you for all being here and participating and contributing. And we look forward to, a finished product that we can share with researchers, practitioners, and knowledge users across the region that can take those questions and move it from just questions to actually, acting. It's not enough to just do research and put it, in a paper, but moving that from research to practice. And that's what we're interested in doing. So thank you. If you have any questions, I know that we're out of time. You can put it in the Woover app, and we'll answer them as we see. So thank you, everyone, and hope you enjoyed the rest of the